What does Romans say about replacement theology and Israel? Well, for centuries, Paul's letter to the Romans has shaped Christian theology and its relationship with Jews and Judaism. But what if the big reason Paul wrote Romans has been misunderstood? Well, first, it's important to note that most people treat Romans like a theological textbook, as if it were Paul's grand summary of salvation and his final word on faith, grace, and the law. But here's the thing. Romans isn't a textbook. It's a letter. And Paul covers a lot in this letter. But there's a specific issue at the heart of Romans that Paul was very passionate about. And it has to do with Christians and their relationship to the Jewish people. So here's the context. So when Paul wrote to the Christ followers in Rome, he hadn't yet visited them. Paul didn't start their community, but as the apostle to the Gentiles, he felt it necessary to prepare the Roman Christ followers for his eventual arrival and visit. So to do that, he wrote Romans to address a troubling report that he had received. So what was the issue? Apparently, Paul had received word that some Gentiles in Rome were drawing problematic conclusions about their new identity as Christ followers. And a central aspect of their confusion was the development of an arrogant posture toward the Jewish community. And Paul felt that this needed to be addressed and stopped immediately. Now keep in mind that at this point in history, the Jesus movement was still within the broader Jewish community. So most of us are conditioned to think of Paul's communities as Christian churches that were already separated from Judaism. But it's most likely that this had not happened yet when Paul wrote Romans. So Paul's communities, including those in Rome, were composed primarily of Gentile Christians who were part of synagogue subgroups. So how these early Christians related to the broader Jewish community, it mattered deeply. And Paul wrote Romans because he was concerned that the health of this relationship was in jeopardy. So throughout the letter, Paul cautions against boasting and arrogance from the Christians toward the Jewish community. One example of this is Romans 11, verse 20, where he says, "Do not become proud, but fear." And specifically, Paul warns the Roman Christians to avoid triumphalism and to resist the idea that they had replaced the Jewish people in God's plan. So Paul was sensing the beginnings of a rupture between Gentile Christians and the Jewish community, and his appeal is for these Christians to not distance themselves from their Jewish roots and the Jewish people. For Paul, the spiritual well-being of the Roman Christians necessitated that they maintain a positive connection to the Jewish people. That's why in Romans 11, Paul uses his famous olive tree metaphor to show that Gentile Christians were grafted among the Jewish branches, not in place of them. So the bottom line is that Paul wrote Romans to communicate a clear message to this early group of Christ followers. And that's this: because of God's mercy, you've come alongside Israel, but you haven't replaced them. So why does this matter today? Well, it matters because it's still very common to understand Paul as an advocate for the idea that Christians replaced Israel as the people of God. Actually, that is the exact opposite message that Paul was promoting in Romans. Paul wrote Romans to make sure that the Gentile Christ followers in Rome understood that they had come alongside the Jewish people as opposed to replacing them. And this is extremely important in our world today. Too many voices still misuse Paul to promote the idea that Israel and the Jewish people have been bypassed and replaced. And this has led to endless negativity and oftentimes tangible harm towards the Jewish people. Paul wrote Romans to encourage kinship, not division between Jews and Christians. And recovering this understanding of Romans today has the potential to go a long way in helping Jews and Christians reimagine what it looks like to live respectfully as spiritual siblings. Hey, if you'd like to learn more about Romans in its Jewish and Greco-Roman context, check out the upcoming Romans Reframed live Zoom study at bridgebuildersforum.com, and don't miss out on any of my new content by subscribing wherever you're watching or listening.